Now let's move on to Hitman 2 Sound Assassin. Now there's this unfortunate thing, I think it might have been around, the new millennium. If a game's tough, a lot of people are going to complain about it, and the sequel might get to be a lot easier. Unfortunately, Hitman 2 is probably one of the most annoying examples of this. Where the first was really tough and really didn't let you make all that many mistakes, if any, this one, for a lot of the levels, you can just blast your way through everyone and everything, and you'll still complete the mission. This gets especially silly on those missions where you're supposed to be sneaking towards the area where your target is, and you know that, if he finds out you're on your way, he's gonna flee. Because that's cancelled out if you don't sneak around in a level or two before the one where he appears. I mean, I'm not kidding. In the first one, if you kill just a couple of policemen or civilians, I think it's 5,000 per policeman and 3,000 per civilian. And if you kill, 2, maybe 3, you're probably gonna get your account closed, and they're gonna tell you, you're too messy, we're not gonna use you anymore. Game over, start over on that mission anyway. Here, I think I can count on one hand the number of missions where you have to sneak. This is also where this annoying sense of humor entered the franchise. There are also a couple of additions that really don't add anything. Like, there's this feature where you can now climb into the back of a truck. And this isn't used all that much, and the basic idea of it is just, you climb onto the back of a truck, it drives into somewhere, and now you're in that area. Now this is nicely enough implemented. You activate it by walking basically into the back of the truck. You keep walking towards it, and when he gets right up to it, he'll start climbing in. However, it takes away from the freedom of it because you basically just have to use that truck. And frankly, it seems to cause bugs. I've experienced a number of times that the truck would run over my enemies, and I'd be deducted as if I had killed them, and it would count against my overall score. Then there's also this feature where, I don't know, I guess they thought that the first one was missing it, so they added that if you're close enough to an opponent to pistol whip him, you will, if you press the attack button. Now this takes like a full second, maybe even a little bit more, and it really doesn't do all that much. So I personally found it to usually be an annoyance. The story's not as good as the first one. It kind of feels like they wrote it just so they could justify the sequel. With that said, I do think that it's an interesting enough idea to have 47 explore, religion, Christianity, as, maybe he could redeem himself somehow. Now, with all of that out of the way, it's still a really good game. The graphics get an upgrade, animations are even smoother than they were in the first one, and they were pretty damn good back then. The weapons are again excellent, and you can now collect them. You have this little cabin sort of place out in the garden of this convent that you're living in. And in this garden there's also plenty of targets, so, you can use, melons, the jackal, as target practice. And there's this life-size dummy of a person which eerily turns its head as you move towards it, but I think it's supposed to help you practice how close you can get to people. And, you can, cut it with knives, or you can, practice your fiber wire on it. Also, the game now actually records if you did get the perfect rating, and it also now has names for the ratings, where before it just said if you killed any civilians or policemen. So if you do absolutely perfect, don't get caught, I think you have to fire one bullet, and that one bullet has to kill the victim, and then you can get the Sound Assassin rating, just like the title. The game again takes you to really cool, exotic places. Sicily, Asia, Russia, complete with, snow and Russian soldiers walking around with those hats and, AK-47s. And this one does give you more freedom than the first one, where, they still hadn't worked out all of the kinks, and they maybe weren't able to provide quite as much freedom, quite as many different ways to go about doing a mission. And in spite of the places where you are locked into a certain course of action, this one does offer a lot of freedom. I do think that the enemies tend to be overly suspicious of you and, immediately open fire if they think that something's wrong. This is the first one where you get, a suspicion meter that, turns red the closer you are to being revealed. And it does tend to be, maybe neurotic is a good word for it, because they seem to just jump on you for absolutely nothing. The satellite map is given a bit of an upgrade. In the first one, it was basically, you could see the outside of buildings. It didn't give away anybody's position except your own, so you could figure out where to go. And it gave away weapon drops and interesting places. In this one you can see everybody. There'll even be a specific color based on what they are. Cops will be blue, enemy guards will be yellow, targets are red, civilians are white or gray, and there might be something greenish for people you're supposed to protect or that you can't kill, something like that. And it shows the inside of buildings, which I guess means that it's not just satellite, because, technically that can't do that, All satellite images showed us was that it's not on the roof. The music in both this and the first one is absolutely excellent. Iron Interactive is a Danish company, and the guy doing the music for all four of them, as well as Freedom Fighters, which I think was based upon a movie called Red Dawn or something, is done by this one Dane called Jesper Kyd. Now there's a bit of a specific touch to each of the four. You can tell apart what game the music came from usually, but all of it is excellent. I don't know enough about music to give you specific details. The second one also has more missions, though some of them are quite short. I think that's all for the second one, so let's move on to Hitman Contracts. Now this one is basically just an upgrade of the second one, and I think the idea was to just tide us fans over until they could release the fourth one, so that they could put more effort into that. Now the title Contracts probably comes from the fact that the entire game is basically him reliving all of his earlier missions. And yes, sadly, that does mean that some of the missions from the first are reworked. They're not straight remakes, so it's not exactly like playing the first one again, but it is still a little annoying. The excuse for them being different is that it's, his memories. Almost the entire game takes place in 47's mind. It starts out with him having been shot, and as he gradually recovers from this, yes, I guess they assume that you played through all of the first two without getting shot at all. Anyway, as he recovers, he remembers all these missions. This one has a bit more of a psychological touch to it, and it's definitely more disturbing. This is also the first place in the series that you really saw, perverse sexuality. And one mission takes place at a, S&M club, and one of the weapons is a meat hook, and you can actually put a dead body up onto the, this thing that takes the, the slaughtered meat around. There's not an awful lot else to say. The map takes a really strong nosedive for some reason. So much so that you almost wonder why they bothered putting in a map at all, if it was going to be that craptacular. You can't even really tell what area leads to what from the map. So you basically have to explore everything before you can really... I'm not even sure there's an in-game compass anymore, so you basically get next to no help at all finding your way around, and a couple of the levels are really, really big.